You know, how long? Not long, right? The fact is, let me be clear. We are moving as expeditiously, as quickly, and as effectively as we can. But I need to protect this prosecution. I am not going to create a situation where somebody can say this was a rush to judgment. Because we're going to say, no, we didn't rush. We were methodical. We were careful. And we made sure that we did everything we needed to do to ensure that this prosecution is successful and that it sticks. And let me just remind your viewers, look, we all saw what happened to Freddie Gray in Baltimore, and there were no convictions in that case. We all saw what happened to Walter Scott. There was a federal conviction later, but the one that went to the jury in South Carolina County Court, there was no conviction.
Understood.
Rodney King, let me remind people, in the Rodney King case, the Simi Valley jury acquitted. So we've got to be careful, methodical, and we've got to make sure that we're playing the long game and that justice prevails, not just in the short term, but permanently.
The president is blaming Antifa for the violence we've seen around the country and in some cases in Minnesota. Have you seen any evidence that any of the demonstrations, the ones that have turned violent, are inspired by Antifa?
I have not seen any evidence like that. I don't regard that as a helpful comment. I think we need to investigate these suspicious characters who have been seen breaking property, and committing acts of arson. Though I have seen evidence of people doing that, but I don't have evidence as to where they're from or what their ideology may be.
It is notable, or it is of note, I should say, your son, who's a Minneapolis city councilor, said, I just want people to see this so people don't think we're glossing over this, said, I hereby declare officially my support for Antifa. He says, though, unless someone can prove to me Antifa is behind the burning of black and immigrant-owned businesses in my ward, I'll keep focusing on stopping the white power terrorists that are actually attacking us, he said. So you think this whole issue of Antifa is a distraction?
I think that is much more. I think that was a comment about the absurdity of the president's comment more than anything else. We don't see what the president's talking about. I don't think the president sees what he's talking about. It's just him trying to. May I just point out that there's not been one single pattern of practice lawsuit against any municipality in America since the president became the president. In fact, he called him back. He tried to roll him back in various jurisdictions, including Illinois. Lisa Madigan had to pick that up and pursue it, who was the Attorney General there. So look, I'm not trying to get into anything. I'm not going to be distracted or deterred from justice for George Floyd. I will say there are more productive and helpful things for the administration to be doing than putting out those kind of distracting tweets.
And just in terms of insiders versus outsiders, if the people on the streets are from Minnesota or Minneapolis and St. Paul or not, have you determined that at this point?
You know what? We know that there have been acts of arson, vandalism, and other criminal acts that have been happening while the noble, just, proper, First Amendment protected protests have happened. And my fear is that the demonstrators who are trying to raise a just cause have seen, and these people are trying to tarnish what they're doing. Where these people are from, I actually don't know. I'm trying to operate on the basis of evidence. It is something that needs to be investigated and needs to be investigated urgently so that we can stop this criminal behavior. But the protesters are people who are well-intentioned and overwhelmingly peaceful. And so that is the comment that I would make about that. We need to investigate it, get to the bottom of it. There's been a lot of video. I urge people who are peacefully demonstrating to videotape with your phone these people committing criminal acts. They're trying to tarnish the reputation of your righteous protest. Protect your protest. Don't let them do it.
He was just appointed by the governor there as the lead prosecutor in this case. Mr. Attorney General, thank you for being with us. Can you tell us why this hearing for the officer was postponed?
You know, at this point, I only got on the case just last night. I'm not prepared to speculate on why that happened. It's not unusual, but I don't have a definitive answer for you at this moment. Why
was it necessary, do you think, to put you, the Attorney General of the state, in charge now as a special prosecutor in this case?
because I think that we need the resources of the entire state. I will be working with Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman, who led the only successful prosecution for murder of a police officer. His office has valuable experience in these matters, and we're looking forward to working closely with them. But we need the resources of the entire state to make sure that we have a fair, just accountability in this matter.
One of the big questions that I know people around the country, including George Floyd's family, have is why haven't charges been filed against the 3 other officers? Last night, in a dramatic moment on CNN, the Minneapolis police chief, Medaria Arradondo, said that he felt that they were complicit in the death of George Floyd. Listen.
Being silent or not intervening, to me, you're complicit. So I don't see a level of distinction any different. Silence and inaction, you're complicit. You're complicit.
Do you share his views? Were the other 3 officers complicit?
What I can tell you is that I'm in charge of the prosecution and am helping work on the investigation. I cannot really say things that could be used later to try to argue that this was not a fair prosecution. I will say that I absolutely have credit the observations of the chief. He has the experience, the knowledge, the know-how, and the integrity to make that comment. He discharged those officers, which I think was incredibly brave and actually quite appropriate. And some people who saw the tape might say, what's so brave about that? I'll say, well, it's one of the first times that we actually saw real accountability for behavior that was so unbecoming of a police officer. And it really shows that if you see something, you've got to do something. You can't look idly by and just let those things happen. But as for me, now that I'm in this role of prosecuting the case, I need to make sure that I'm not commenting on the evidence. I know that's very unsatisfactory for people who have seen the tape and are so outraged. I had sympathized with that, but I'm just asking for them to trust me to make sure that I see this prosecution all the way through the right way.
All right, without commenting on the specific case then, as a legal matter, if someone is complicit in a murder, what would be the legal ramifications that they would face?
Well, without regard to this particular case, they could face aiding and abetting liability. Their duties were people in special positions to have to render aid. If it's your job to render aid, you must render that aid under certain statutes. There are a number of statutes that assign culpability among people who may have had varying levels of activity, but who were all in it together. So this is not an unusual thing in American law. It is common when people commit crimes together in joint group, or when one person commits a crime and the other one kind of lets it happen and actually ensures or encourages it happen. You can be held culpable and liable for that. But on this point, you're asking me about a point of law, which I'm explaining, and I want to be clear that I'm not commenting on the case.
I understand that. How long do people need to be patient? It has been a week since the death of George Floyd. There have been charges filed against the officer whose knee was on his neck. So how long?
Right. Well, Martin Luther King asked,